Hello, everybody. Tonight we're going to take a look at the Earth again for the Beyond Borders project, and basically try to take a very careful look at what's going on with the mountain range, the minerals, basically the industry that is perhaps one of the most important industries on the planet, the mineral industry, basically oil, gas, and all the other minerals, cement, gold, copper. Anything that basically we use day to day to build something. So we're going to start by looking at the mountain range here, and this is one of the first things that I did when I started studying the planet. I took a screenshot here to kind of get better perspective for what's going on. I'm going to change the green color here, and you're going to kind of see. Let's even do. I think we're going to do it in red just to kind of show you. So there's actually not a whole lot of mountain ranges on the planet. When you think about it, the major ones, perhaps the biggest mountain range, which I'm going to talk about a little bit differently than classical way that they talk about mountain ranges. But basically we have this mountain range that goes all the way from the South Pole to the North Pole. And this is the Andes Mountains and then the Rocky Mountains up in here. And then we have another mountain range that basically starts in Europe and goes all the way out basically to Alaska. So it basically goes from here to here. And then this is all the Andes. And this is basically the Himalaya mountain range. And then the last mountain range is kind of the last few mountain ranges are kind of interesting because they're weird. You basically have this one going on through Africa, like this kind of, and then spinning off towards the Middle East and then basically Israel. And then you have kind of this Southeast Asia mountain range that goes out in the ocean. So we're going to look at all of these, but basically these are the primary ones on a map. Let's just take a look at that map carefully again. So basically you can see here this European range. Let's zoom in, look a little bit closer to this. But sometimes the waterways gets in the way and it's hard to see exactly what's going on. But you can see there's quite a lot of mountains in Spain, and then you get the France divider here, and then France is actually pretty flat, except for the south part of France. And then you get into Italy, and then it kind of splits. And then this is where you get some really interesting things. So a lot of these mountain ranges we think of as pretty flat and stable because once we hit that mountain range, it's basically kind of like a wall, but actually it kind of swirls around here in Europe, and then comes out through here, and then now we get into basically this is Turkey and then Iran, and then there's a very interesting thing that happens after you get through Iran. You get up into Afghanistan and Pakistan and then northern India. So this is basically the tallest mountains in the world. Now the interesting thing is, can you guess, if you didn't know where Mount Everest was, can you guess where it is? And interestingly, it's actually located over in this region over here. So that's, you'd think it'd be located over here, or maybe right in the center here. But it's not at all. It's actually located kind of along the frontal range, and then down towards this side. But a lot of the tallest mountains in the world are basically out there. So as we zoom out here, you'll see that this range actually gets quite complex again as it heads out into Siberia. And there's actually some very mysterious lakes in here. This lake alone right here, because the mountains are so high around this lake, actually has more water than all of the Great Lakes. So there's some misunderstandings about what is going on in general. So let's go look at the Andes Mountains, and you basically have Andes starting mostly in Chile on the western side, and they're actually taller. The interesting thing is that these mountains are taller than the ones that we see here in North America, but basically it's really crunched in here, and the force of the fields kind of push the rock in here. I'm going to show you one other map to kind of look at how that all works in a moment, but this is all going up to Alaska, and the tallest mountain actually is up in Alaska, not down here. It's actually, there's one kind of located here, and then there's another one called the 14ers, and then they're 14,000 feet. But there's basically a taller one, Mount McKinney or Denali, up in this area. I think right there, I believe. But then let's look at Alaska. So what we're really looking for outside of these major mountain ranges is stuff like this, right? Like what we have down in South America, and also what's going on in Africa, and these weird regions like the Ural Mountains that come out of here. This is what we're really looking for, is why those regions, how those affect industry and commerce and all these other factors. So basically, if you're not familiar with this, I collect all these maps. I have about 100 or so maps. You're welcome to grab some of them here. It's just on this page. I'll load it up right up here on the top of the toolbar here. I don't know if you can read that. Can't really read it too carefully, but it's just AsherCMartinWordPress.com/maps, and that has all the links to what we're going to be talking about today. So basically, as we look at the world, it's definitely got quite a lot to try to understand. Now, I want to look at two other areas that are really important to think about, because we have to think about the ocean. So as we think about the ocean, basically Southeast Asia becomes very important, because it's very mysterious. You have a lot of these mountains that come peak up outside from the ocean, basically. So it's a very weird shapes in the land. Perhaps more difficult to understand than any place else on the planet is Southeast Asia. So you're going to understand that the climate's going to be complex here, because you have mountains. You can have snow up in the mountains and the tall mountains, and then all the way down to the beaches, which is very warm water. So kind of a mixture of complexities as you try to understand what's going on here. So the other really interesting spot is actually in the Caribbean, in Haiti. So you can see that down in here, we have quite a lot of stuff going on, basically right here in Haiti, and then coming out through Venezuela. So the weird thing about this is that the more you start to understand how these mountains work, the more you'll start to understand how the Earth works, and then how business works and everything else connected to the geography of our planet. So let me give you one simple example, is that this whole mountain range, basically the Andes mountain range, it all starts down in South America, but goes all the way up here and then hits here, and then you can kind of see it splits off and spins around to the side here. But this area here actually gets the most lightning on the planet. It captures the heat from the water, and then the water, and then the dryness as you get up into the higher altitudes, and then it suddenly creates lots of lightning. So this is basically Lake Maracaibo, and this is one of the earliest things that I started to realize that, the more I start to understand the planet, the more I'm really going to be able to really solve important problems and help out with what's going on. If you just don't know what the mountains are, you might not be as wise about working together on problems and understand what is really going on in each of these regions. So, and then on the ocean front, we basically have a lot of weird things happening basically out in Southeast Asia, as well as down here. You got New Zealand here, and then you got Australia. So hopefully that takes you through most of the stuff. I'm going to look at one other major map here. So this is the earthquake map. So it's basically a collection from 1960s all the way to today. So it's got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of earthquakes on one map. It was almost slowed my computer down, and you'll see the screen is a little bit weird because there's so much data on here. But let's take you to the other side of the planet. I just want to show you the whole thing first before we start to see. But basically, the earthquakes follow this mountain range, and we'll go kind of look at how that works. So as you look into Europe, you basically have Greece, and it all starts in Greece and kind of takes off into the Himalayas. And then you can start to see, let's zoom in here to see how that works. So you can see, get even a little bit closer. So here we are basically in Iran, and then you get this pile up of earthquakes right here in Afghanistan. and then kind of splitting off here. And we found something very interesting. One of the things that I found that was super interesting by following these earthquakes was Bangladesh here. My roommate and I were sitting here discussing how Bangladesh is connected to the rest of the world. And what we did is we traced this line. So here's Bangladesh, and we followed all these earthquakes around the world to kind of see how, if these earthquakes are all interconnected, which they are, where does this all go? So we flip this around, and you'll notice this is part of Asia, but basically it's Southeast Asia, and it comes all the way down here. So Bangladesh is actually very much connected, and you'll notice that a lot of the people that look like they're from Bangladesh might also look like they're from Papua New Guinea and some other places way out here. And even as far as Fiji, there's a lot of Indians out in Fiji. The Indian population is quite high. So, and that's all because of this following this earthquake line. So if you can kind of reconnect different parts of the world differently by looking at how these earthquakes are connected. And this heads north up into Japan and the Ring of Fire and then Taiwan. So you can see just how many earthquakes. There's just loaded. It's just hard to even explain how many earthquakes have gone on. And it's just extremely dangerous, actually. So, and then Alaska actually gets the most for us. Some of the biggest ones that we've had experienced in our lifetime, or several in the last few lifetimes, have been up in Alaska. You can see this big one here. This is the 9.0. And that one right there is a ginormous one. So, and if you want, you should take a look at some pictures. The other thing that surprised me is how many earthquakes are getting down here along the west coast of Mexico and Central America. So we really think of earthquakes here in California, but this all heads down far south. And some of the bigger earthquakes are actually happening down in South America. And in this kind of also ring circular area, you can see there's quite a lot of earthquakes there. Cuba is kind of separate from that. But the United States is, for most part, pretty empty from earthquakes. And there's a lot of people working on studying what's going on because earthquakes can just devastate everything. In South America, most of the east coast of South America has basically no earthquakes whatsoever. So Brazil doesn't really experience what's going on, like over in Chile. They have no clue. So it's kind of like America, actually. Same with Africa. You'll notice very few earthquakes in Africa. They're just not familiar with what's going on in terms of the earthquakes. But when they are, it basically goes through the Great Lakes of Africa. And a lot of people say that this part of Africa is splitting in two. So East Africa may actually become its own continent or its own big landmass, which is kind of interesting to see. But hopefully you found this interesting to look at. Yeah, it's a very helpful map to see. So let's go back to the rest of the maps here and see what else we can look at. So in terms of oil, these are the major oil regions. We've all heard about Venezuela, but honestly, it looks like it's very compact. If they do have oil, a lot of oil down there, it's very compact. Looks like the jungle, Amazon jungle, is getting a lot of oil. And then you see different places in Africa, Middle East, and then off of the coast of into Europe, and then Russia. Some of their big supplies are actually located in Russia, and then you can see Pakistan, India, basically having quite a lot as well, and then down in Australia. And there's actually two different versions of this map. You can load up other versions to see. But I wanted to show you this one. This is the global mineral map. Maybe it's not loading properly. Might take a minute because there's so much data here. But basically, this is almost like a secretive map because this is where the minerals are on the planet for all the mines. Basically, this is a map of all the mines on the planet. And we really need to be cautious about what we're doing. You'll see, actually, the mines do not necessarily follow only the mountain ranges. Yes, they do kind of follow the mountain range primarily, but there's a lot of stuff going on for mining outside of just the mountain ranges. But here you can see down in Africa, quite a lot of mining going on, basically in South Africa and then along the coast of West Africa, and then up into Europe and some other areas. And sorry, this map is taking so long to load. Might be because I'm streaming here now and it's also trying to load the data, but you can see Australia, it has quite a number of mines as well. Now I wanted you to look at this map. This one was really nice. This is a food and agricultural map, and you can kind of see some of that the architecture of how Europe works. Just with that, this eastern mountain range is so mysterious as you get out into Budapest and further, basically into Eastern Europe, and that kind of almost separates Eastern Europe from Western Europe. This mountain range right here, so there's still a lot to look at here. You can see northern Africa, and then you can see also heading out over into this side here. Now this is looking at what's going on in the most complicated region on our planet, which is Southeast Asia, and you can see this is from the Himalayas on the edge here, and you have all this other stuff. Basically these are all volcanoes, mostly just tipping out of the ocean front. So this is probably just all super volcanoes basically that created all of this at one point, but many of these islands are very mysterious because of that thing. And then I wanted you to look at Central America, kind of the mountain ranges in here, as well as what we talked about, Lake Maracaibo, because you can see Colombia and Venezuela are starting to become hot topics, in not just in the news, but also for business. There's a lot of land there, and there's a lot of business to be done in terms of food, agriculture, other types of work happening, especially in the Caribbean as well. So you should definitely get familiar with this map. If you're familiar with the United States, there's a lot of really fun areas to work in down here. It's in Central America and tip of northern South America. And I think I got one last map here. This is kind of the global one, just so you can see what it looks like on this green map. So this is all the mountains, kind of looking at the whole entire planet. I'll basically post a link for this, but I'll show you. If you have it on video, you can pause this video link here, and then this is the link up here. Don't use that, use that link there, and you can pause the video if you need to grab that link. It's quite a long link. Let me see if I can do a smaller link, shorten this link. This is a shorter link for this whole map. Nope, not at all. Okay, so but yeah, so basically this is a pretty helpful map. I use this all the time for geography and stuff like that. Looks like we dropped out of the USGS map. This is the last 30 days of earthquakes, so it's pretty helpful looking at just the last 30 days. So you can see definitely there's a lot of action happening in the United States, and then in Southeast Asia, and then up to Alaska, as well as into kind of like Pakistan, northern Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then you have Iran and Turkey and basically Greece, that area. So that one's pretty helpful to look at. This one is the geological map, and there are some geological departments will have massive maps of these in their hallways, so you can take a look at what the planet looks like. But this is nice to see the geology for the whole entire planet. And you can use this link up here. I think it's just the first half of the link that you can use to get to this map. And then you can do overlays to get it to look just like this. But basically there's a lot of different types of rock. You can see that the hardness of the rock sometimes depends on the mountain range and where it's located on the planet. So each of these are different minerals because the rock is different. So there's going to be different minerals located in those regions. And let's go over to Southeast Asia right here. And then this is the other geological map. This is the one published by the USGS. I don't really like it as much as this one, but it's helpful. It gives you kind of some ideas, and you can kind of see that whole mountain range, how that changes geologically, how the rock is similar or different in different regions. And you see definitely the Ural Mountains come through here as a kind of a mysterious piece. So what are we talking about in terms of total financial value here? So we're talking about basically about a third of this whole chart is probably minerals, maybe a fourth of the chart. When you add petroleum plus gold and minerals, and then all the other commodities that are important, you probably have that chart here. That's for the world. And again, so this is part of the Beyond Borders project. We're basically going through this whole entire economy of the world and looking at how that relates to different maps of our planet and kind of trying to understand how we all work together. Let me just see what's going on with the chat. Okay, it looks like things are okay. And if you have some suggestions or ideas, please let me know. I'm looking for some other partners to work with on understanding some of these ideas around the world. So feel free to send me a message if you'd like to try to work with me on understanding some section of the globe. I'd be glad to try to work with you. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed this study. And I'll just go through here one last time. Again, we looked at all the minerals of the world, kind of seeing where the petroleum is. And then there's different maps for that. And then this is still trying to load, is all the mines for the planet. We went through and looked at all the mines for where that all is going. And then we studied kind of these different regions. This is a topological map. You try to get a feel for how particularly the west and the east are connected via these vast mountain ranges. And then we looked at the 30-day earthquake map and tried to get some ideas about that. We also looked at the geological map. Here, this is pretty helpful to see. There's a couple different geological maps and a bunch of other things. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this study. Be sure to contact me if you'd like to continue the research. Thank you so much.